In 1985, two British mountaineers, Joe Simpson and Simon Yates, set out to climb the west face of Siula Grande in the Peruvian Andes, a route no one had ever successfully completed. They reached the summit. The descent would become one of the most extraordinary survival stories in climbing history. On the way down, in a whiteout storm, Joe fell from an ice ledge and shattered his lower leg, driving his shin bone up through his knee joint. In the Andes, at extreme altitude, with no rescue possible, a broken leg is usually a death sentence. Simon refused to leave him. He improvised a system, tying together two lengths of rope and lowering Joe down the mountain in stages, 500 feet at a time, through a raging blizzard, in the dark, with no way to communicate between them. For hours, the system worked. Lower Joe, wait for a tug on the rope, climb down and repeat. It was slow, brutal, and their only chance. Then Simon lowered Joe over the edge of a cliff neither of them could see in the storm, straight into empty space. Joe was left dangling in midair, over a crevasse, unable to climb up or reach the ground. Simon, above, felt the rope go taut and unmoving. He couldn't see what had happened. He couldn't communicate with Joe, and his own anchor in the snow was beginning to fail. Simon held on as long as he physically could. The snow anchor was collapsing beneath him. If he didn't act, they would both be pulled off the mountain together. He made the decision that has been debated in mountaineering circles ever since. Simon cut the rope. Joe fell into the darkness of a crevasse below, and Simon, believing his climbing partner was now dead, spent the night alone on the mountain before descending the next morning, certain he had killed his friend to survive. Joe did not die. He fell into the crevasse and landed on a narrow ledge deep inside the ice, alive but with a shattered leg, in complete darkness, with no way to climb out and no reason to believe anyone would ever come looking for him. For a full day, Joe considered simply waiting to die in the crevasse. Then he made a decision that defies ordinary survival logic. Instead of climbing up toward the entrance, he lowered himself further down into the darkness, gambling that the crevasse might open out somewhere below. It was an extraordinary bet against instinct. Neuroscientists studying decision-making under extreme duress note that this kind of counterintuitive choice, moving toward danger rather than away from it, requires overriding the brain's most basic threat avoidance response. The gamble worked. Joe found a slope of ice leading up and out of the crevasse into daylight. But he was now alone, injured, without a partner, food, or water, roughly 10 kilometers from base camp, over glacier and rock, with one leg that could not bear weight. He began to crawl. Using his ice axe as a crutch, dragging his shattered leg behind him, Joe covered the distance in stages, setting small, achievable targets for himself, refusing to think about the entire journey at once, only the next rock, the next ridge. Psychologists call this technique goal chunking, breaking an impossible task into a sequence of achievable micro-goals. It is one of the most well-documented psychological survival strategies, and Joe arrived at it instinctively, alone, in unbearable pain. 3 days after being cut loose, Joe crawled into camp, hours before Simon had planned to pack up and leave for good, believing there was no possibility his friend had survived. Simon heard him calling from outside the tent in the middle of the night. Joe Simpson never blamed Simon for cutting the rope. He said it was the only rational decision available in that moment, and that it likely saved both their lives. Their story remains one of climbing's most studied examples of impossible choices and impossible endurance. That's last chance survival. Every story on this channel asks the same question. Not just how did they survive, but what was happening inside their mind in the moment it mattered most. Because the truth is, most of us will never be trapped under ice, or left for dead on a mountain, or stranded with nothing but our own will to survive. But every single one of us will face our own breaking point. And when that moment comes, the difference between giving up and finding a way through often comes down to understanding the mind, what it's capable of, and what it will do when everything else has failed. That's what this channel is built on. If this story stayed with you, there are more like it waiting. Real people, real psychology, real survival. Subscribe, and you won't miss the next one, because the next story might be the one that changes how you see your own limits.